Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed confidence that his country will triumph over invading Russian forces. This as fears mount of possible strikes on the war's first anniversary today. A year ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine from the north, east and south in what he called a special military operation. Let's get an update from the ground. We're joined by correspondent William Denselow. William, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. It's almost hard to believe and quite frankly sad that it's been a year since Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Just take us back to this day last year, just the anxiety and confusion all over the world.
Absolutely. Of course, this time last year, thousands of people were fleeing their homes here in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, and in the subsequent days as Russian forces were advancing towards the country's capital. Now, a year on, millions of people, of course, as you rightly say, have fled their homes. Many have left the country. More than 5 million people remain internally displaced. But here in the city's capital, Zelensky's government still very much remains in power. It's really exemplified the stability here relatively, considering the fact that President Zelensky just this week alone has been able to host a number of world leaders, including the Prime Ministers of Spain and Italy, a delegation from the US, and of course the US President Joe Biden. We've heard from President Zelensky marking this very poignant anniversary. He says that a year ago, Ukrainians made a choice to wave not a white flag, but the flag, the blue and yellow of Ukraine. He said it has been a year filled with pain, sorrow, faith and unity, but he says 2023 will be the year of Ukraine's victory.
Was certainly a very defiant president. He has stood his ground, nevertheless. But the loss of life has been most devastating, but also the economic impact on the country. Just talk to us about the impact of this invasion on Ukraine's economy.
Absolutely. Well, we know that in 2022, GDP fell more than 30%, inflation soaring more than 25%. It's estimated today that around 1/3 of Ukrainians that had a job before the full-scale invasion are currently unemployed, and there continues to be major headwinds for the economy going forward. Let's not forget just the impact that almost daily missile strikes across some parts of the country continue to have on people's daily lives, people being disrupted from their workplaces if they need to go to shelters, for example. Of course, the missile strikes on critical infrastructure leaves thousands of people in parts of the country for long periods of time without electricity or without heating, of course, even more prominently felt during the winter. So this all has ramifications for the country's economy. It is estimated, according to Ukraine's central bank, that the economy will pick up to the tune of around 0.3% this year. But Ukraine also warns that its entire pre-war budget currently is being spent on its armed forces. That is why Ukraine says it urgently needs extra financial support from the international community. We know that the International Monetary Fund has already stepped in for a couple of packages of loans in the past year, and there is certainly a lot of confidence from the IMF that another round of financial assistance can be provided to Ukraine in the coming days.
And then on Russia's presence, they still maintain somewhat of a presence. We understand that 1/5 of the country is being controlled by them. Talk to us about their presence there and perhaps the forces now that are looking to push them backwards.
Well, it's a presence that has been here in Ukraine, obviously felt prominently in more parts of the country over the past year. But as far as Ukrainians are concerned, Russia's presence has been very unwelcome here in the country for nearly a decade, since 2014. And as Russia says, the annexation of Crimea. So these are all territories that Ukraine says will continue to fight for. The message from Ukrainians and Ukrainian officials is they won't accept peace plans that provide concessions to Russia to claim parts of their territory. Ukraine says it's not looking to take any Russian territory. It simply wants its own lands back. So that includes parts of the Donbass that Russia currently is in control of, cities like Mariupol in the south, Crimea as well. So territories that have not only been taken in the past year, but have been under Russian occupation for nearly a decade too. Fierce fighting continues in the east, like you mentioned. Cities around like Bakhmut remain incredibly closely and tightly fought over, and there are real concerns from UK intelligence we're hearing today that this could be a protracted battle, and that Russia may be seeking to be in it for the long haul to essentially wear down Ukrainian forces.
And what has been the sentiment today as Ukrainians mark this particular moment a year on? What has been the sentiment on the ground?
Well, of course, as we've heard from President Zelensky, really a moment of defiance to show how a year on Ukraine very much stands strong and stands united. A poignant moment too, of course, Ukraine's president touching on that, how much pain and sorrow, misery and loss of life has been inflicted. Of course, the United Nations estimates that around 8,000 civilians have lost their lives in the past year here in Ukraine. The UK, citing their own independent analysts, believe that figure could be twice that. So, of course, it's an opportunity as well to remember those that have lost their lives over the past year. But, of course, going forward, a chance for resiliency. For many people, we're expecting an address from Ukraine's president who will certainly touch on those points. And, of course, there are renewed security threats. There's been plenty of chatter over recent weeks that Russia may use this anniversary to fire lobbies of missiles towards various Ukrainian cities. Now, a spokesperson for the Air Force here in Ukraine says that Russia may send some surprises, as he puts it, but because Ukraine is ready, he says that Russia may pick another day to launch this escalation in missile bombardments.